The next one is where we are going to talk about the future of work and learning in the context of the pandemic, focusing on the digital type versus the digital divide. As you heard in the beginning of the event, all of these sessions have been closely organized together with the efforts of our supporter organizations that we have at the DVHA New Delhi. I would like to now, for the next one, introduce the moderator or the chair of the session, who is Dr. Katja Lasch, who is the director of the DVHA. So she not only is the director of the DVHA, but also the DAD regional office in this region. And prior to this, she was heading DAD's international marketing division in Bonn and also an information center in Bucharest. She has worked quite a bit in the international cultural exchange and has a doctorate in history and is qualified in business administration. Her professional interests are in the field of international university and research cooperation and also in entrepreneurship. Thank you so much, Katja, for taking up the chair or moderation of this session. And thanks a lot to the audience for sticking around. I hope you find this session interesting as well. Katja, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Adishi, for that kind introduction. I hope that Qualitative also will join in a minute, but nevertheless, let me start. I hope we can have and continue with an interesting session. I think this session is interesting to everybody, as working from home, homeschooling, distance teaching is affecting, if one not self, then family and friends. So it's all over the place, and I think everybody has an opinion on this topic. The pandemic has caused a shift on both the learning and the work fronts, forcing basically a lot of people to go digital. And as I said, I think most of the audience faced the situation where they suddenly had to work from home, where they suddenly had to teach distance teaching, doing remote exams, and so on. The pandemic has driven digital economy, but more than 40% of the world's population are still offline, and I think that's also something we will address today. So together in the session, I hope to explore with the speakers to explore the challenges of remote working, distance learning and teaching, and we will address the level of schools in India, especially. We will address the level of teaching in universities with a German perspective, and also the level of remote working. I had a look at a couple of numbers, and I found an interesting report, the D21 report in Germany, who stated that Corona led to the doubling the numbers of workers of working from home. I think we will address that a bit later. And the survey participants but also reported that full-time working from home does not suit them and might not be an opportunity or a decision for the future. With regard to education, the report states that people with background in higher education and management positions take more advantage of digitalization, and there is, under the participants in this survey, a fear, and it's believed that Corona has fostered in Germany inequality in education, and I think, Protiva, we will relate to that also with India in a minute. And last but not least, 2/3 of all students in Germany face challenges during homeschooling, lesser technical but organizational. I also found it an interesting finding and maybe a good point of departure. If we look at India, one can state that India has the world's second largest pool of internet users, more than 600 million, which is comprising more than 12% of all users globally, but yet half of its population lacks internet access. And a total of 20 million learners in India have been adversely affected and transitioned to e-learning. So more than 320 million people were pushed back home last year. And this compromises also a network of 1.5 million schools. So we are talking on large scales, and we're addressing that. And it was already mentioned in the introduction that out of 66% of India's population that resides in rural communities, only 40% have internet access. It's much better, much worse than compared to the urban households. And with regard to remote working, the Gardner report states, it's a report who just was currently published in the US, that India and China will produce some of the largest numbers of remote workers, but their overall penetration rates will remain relatively low with 30%. And I think Germany is expected to be 38, if I recall it correctly, so we can maybe take that up. So let's start the discussions. I would recall the audience, please ask your questions in the chat. We will take them up. I'm glad that we have with us 3 speakers on this panel. We will have 3 short presentations, and then I would suggest that we club the discussion together so to address the topic at different levels. So let me introduce shortly the speakers. We have with us Pratibha Kundu. Her areas of interest are education, gender, and rural development, and she works at the Center for Budget and Governance Accountability, and there she leads the research on government financing education. And prior to this work, she worked as an economist at the Policy Group of Infrastructure Development Finance Company. And the title of one of her recent study was Poor Connectivity, Shattered Dreams, is Bridging Digital Divide Easier Said Than Done? I think we will have a look into that. The second speaker will be Dr. Malte Sacher, who is the scientific director of the Center for Teaching and Learning Services at the RWTH Aachen University. He is responsible for the strategic development and implementation of the overarching research plan at CLS. So he observes, he researches the digital teaching, but he's also, of course, into digital teaching. He's an expert in digital teaching, learning and testing, and as well as data-driven improvement of learning context. And in 2012, he received Germany's most prestigious Arts Legendi Award for excellent teaching in social sciences. So welcome, Malte Sacher. And I found a speech from you from 2019 in the internet yesterday. Virtual and augmented reality, from the niche to the mainstream. That was your argument in autumn 2019 back. So let us see where we are with digital teaching at the moment at university level in Germany. Did the pandemic catalyze research and application? Let's see. Our third speaker is Professor Dr. Hannes Sacher. He is a professor of work and organizational psychology at the Institute of Psychology at the Leipzig University. He has earned his PhD from the University of Gießen and has worked in academic positions in Australia and the Netherlands. In his research program, he investigates aging at work, career development, occupational health and well-being, and a lot of other topics, but he also has done great research on COVID. And 2 weeks ago, Professor Sacher, you had an interview with a German newspaper, which was headed "Working from home has made us neurotic." So let us see, is that true? How did working from home affect us? So we start with Pratibha, who will address the level of schools. Pratibha, the floor is yours for your short input.
Thank you so much, Katja. I have a presentation. Should I share myself?
Yeah, please do so.
This is visible now.
Yeah, could you go in full mode presentation? That would be great.
See now.
Let's
Is it coming?
see.
Okay, let me start. So, so basically, we have seen that last year when the pandemic there is outbreak, then almost 320 million school-going children in India was just out of school because of the school closure. Now, since education, right to education is, our fundamental right, so India government was basically, it's obligated to provide them this children education and digital education. No other options were there other than, shifting the platform from traditional classroom to a digital mode. So we have seen that April onwards, all schools at least majority of the schools were in the country were going online. Now it is already 1.6 years. Yeah. So the school closure is happening. So the question is, what is the experience of the student, experience of the children? So I can see the presentation.
Yes.
Can you see it?
No, it's loading. I think maybe we stick to the non-full mode and then you go to the next slide. I think to be visible to the audience.
Yeah. So I don't know whether if it is not coming, then I will request Ramnit, but otherwise I can go on.
I'll share the presentation and then give you the rights.
Yeah, that would be great. Thanks, Ramnit.
I'm sorry, but actually these things makes the topic more real. These are the challenges that
That's
that
a good
always
remark. If
happen.
everything would have gone smoothly, we would not have the question, has the transition been smooth? So the presentation is now here. Fatima, please go ahead.
Yeah. So yeah. So now, should I go to the next slide? How do I go to the next slide now, or we will go? I don't know.
There is this little arrow on the left-hand side, or Ramit, if you could
Yeah,
take it
Professor
forward.
Kundu, on the left-hand side, if you scroll your cursor to the left-hand side, you'll see an arrow key just written below number 1, and that's there you change your slides.
I can't see. I'm really sorry.
Ramit,
Can you please run this
yes,
for me
Okay,
because
I'll do
just
that. I'll do
right.
that.
yeah,
I'll do
waiting
that.
time
This
is
is
yeah. So
remote presenting.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, please could you please go to the next slide, please?
Yes.
So this is actually two media clips I am here. This is the first one is from the last year, May 2020, when we're saying that Indian education can't go online because 88% homes have both the computer as well as internet connectivity. Now, just after 1 year, just 2 days back, there is one more media report, September 2021, which is saying only 8% rural kids in online classes. I mean, before the situation, the pandemic started, and now you can see that there is not much changes. So the question is, what is happening? What the story behind this? Now, whenever next slide, please. So whenever we look at the online education, obviously we all discussed about these three basic things which is required for digital learning. One is access to electricity, one is access to device, and the third is access to internet connectivity. Uh, so next slide. Now come look at the first graph. When we talk about access to electricity, if you can look up any of the government's document, it says the 100% households are actually electrified. Now the question is, for even for charging your device, even to having the broadband connection to function, you need a proper quality service of electricity. But only 50% households get electricity for more than 2 hours, 12 hours, and around 20% not get even just get even only for 8 hours the connectivity. The about the computer access and internet access, already in the previous session Dr. Matthias has mentioned that there is divide across class, across caste, across religion, region, place of residence, gender, etc. The second graph, which is showing the access to computers by income class, it's showing that only 4.4% rural households are actually have access to computers. And access to computer doesn't mean that they own the computer. They somehow have the access. Uh, in third graph, when we are talking about the access to internet facility, then again, to see that reaches the top 20% households, even in urban, they only 62% are actually using the internet facility. Now you can read the reports that India is the third biggest country in the world which are using smartphones. There are by 2022, 840 million will have the smartphones. Have each individual have that many numbers of 840 million. Indians have smartphones. Now, the question is, when we are talking about education, digital consumer and a digital learner, there is a huge difference between these two terms. So whenever we are talking about learning, we need to have at least trustworthy quality internet service, a network connection. So there is one more survey by QS, one organization, they did survey with students in 2020. The fourth graph I am talking about, they have shown that those who are using home broadband connection, largely they're facing challenges of 53% facing challenges of poor connectivity and 32% of poor signal. And similarly, if comes the question of mobile hotspot or smartphone usage, then again this is the same. These two things are the largest barrier in terms of a better quality of internet. So this is the macro scenario in which we have seen that before the pandemic, in this backdrop, we just started taking classes in online mode. And but when the digitalization is very much, it's a buzzword now, but we have seen this, the digital divide is real. Now, what is the story? Those who are attending online classes, are they happy with this new arrangement? So the whole answer lies in how the learning is happening at home, how it is getting conducted by school, or how things are happening at family. So that's why in CBG, in our organization, we did a couple of surveys, one with all school-going children of 5 to 19 age groups, and other one specifically for 15 to 19 age group, that means who are adolescent and attending secondary level of education, specifically for Delhi. And through their responses, actually, we gain an in-depth understanding of the challenges of access they are facing. This including not only the barriers to access, which many of them completely cut off a student from the whole school system. Also, there are barriers that persist even if the student is connected and attending a classes. Next slide, please. So from the field experience, let me share some of the qualitative findings, because there is not much very large scale survey happened till now at what is happening at the Indian level. Piecemeal surveys are there at state level or at district level. But that's why we also want to see what is happening at the field level, at the ground, what is the ground reality. So we have one thing is clear, that majority is not enjoying the online classes. And there is a strong dislike which observed among girls. And if we compare that with boys. And what the major thing is that largely they are using the mode of education is WhatsApp, and the smartphone is getting used, not the computer. So those who reported the attending online classes is also not the case that they are present every day or they are attending classes, all the classes in any given day. Now, so there is now the challenges of access. So what are the different dimensions of access? Access is not very, I mean, there are very much so many layers in each aspect. So I just try to mention about the kind of information that we gathered from the student, and I have tried to categorize those in three major heads. First is coming the affordability. So the largest problem is there, very few children are actually owning a device, and device means either laptop, computer, desktop, or smartphones. So most of them need to share the device either with their parents or with their siblings. Now, when the generally when if we talk about government and government aided schools, it's the case that mostly the marginalized section of children are actually attending government schools, though still 60% of children actually goes to government schools, but still that is the case. So the households, those where the parents are going for work, they are taking the device with them, and this was more challenge when the initial lockdown was lifted, because the earning member had to leave the house to go for work, and they are taking the phone. And when it's question of coming to sharing the device among siblings, it has been seen that two things have come out. One is in the households where there are students of standard 10th and standard 12th, they are getting priority because they have broad exams. Whereas the other siblings who are in other classes other than 10 and 12, they are not getting the access that much. And when it comes to personal device, it's the boys who are more likely to have a personal device than girls. In fact, many respondents, they reported that they bought smartphone actually. Earlier, they don't had smartphone, but eventually for attending online classes, they bought it. But largely they bought either second-hand phone or a phone with not, I mean, of the range of 5,000 rupees, or they got it from different voluntary organizations. The other aspect of affordability is internet connection. So if you are having classes for 2 to 5 hours a day on an average, so if if it is you have to keep the video on, then you need to have regular basis, you need to recharge your data and give either. So what is happening, either they have to spend extra money for recharging the network, or whatever limited recharge they have, within which whatever they can, how many classes they're able to attend, they're doing. Otherwise, they just skip the classes. And the third thing is the cost on study materials, especially that was the problem at secondary level. Because of this pandemic, many of the parents have lost their job, or there was salary cut, etc. So they couldn't buy textbooks, they couldn't provide exam fees. And there was in around secondary level onwards, the government doesn't provide free textbooks, or etc. etc. So they don't have even the other support materials to study if there is no digital support is happening. Coming to the second dimension, that is quality. As I already mentioned about the device, since one thing has happened, since they are buying the cheap device or second hand, many of the respondents have said for a 45-minute Zoom class, very fast the phone started overheating, and then the students need to force to drop off the call, or they just the phone just gets switched off. Some students even reported that they are just placing their phones to wet clothes to cool them down. And the second aspect, again, the poor internet connectivity. So as the connectivity is so poor in many places, either they are going outside to attend the classes, or there is video, interrupted video coming. And this problem is not only for students, also for the teachers. And the third aspect is about quality learning is a conducive environment. As long as there is online classes, so you are now attending the classes from home. In India, we have seen only 36%, around 36% households have a single room to dwell. So and that is also come out in our survey also. So there is many of them had respondents have said they don't have any quiet place so that they can concentrate, they can understand the classes online. So these three broad aspects we have seen in terms of access to quality. The third characteristics is ability. So when we are talking about the digital education, you have to have some sort of digital literacy. And since this is a very new thing, not only for students and also for teachers, many of them are not technologically inept. So for many of the students, Google Meet, Zoom, MS Office, these are very new name. They were not earlier familiar with all these terminologies or all these activities. And so initially these were very difficult for them. Now eventually they are getting used to it, but it was a problem for them. And there was gender divide even in the access to in terms of the access to devices. And because one of the reasons you can find out that the men feel that girls do not need to, in many households, girls do not need to use, or they don't want to use the internet. And the girls responded, said that we don't get phone so much in our hands. So how do I learn when the things are happening? So that's why that is one of the area of disparity in terms of ability. It's not the case that they don't know if they get the chance, they are not able to do it, but they're just not getting the chance. Even in Delhi government school, for some of the special category schools, the students of class 10th, 12th have been given tablets. But even those students have said that the tablets had very limited functionality, and they had to figure out most of the functions on their own. So even that is not helping them, because no one was there to support how to use those devices. And for many children, their parents are first generation learners, so they didn't get any parental support also. The second factor that affects their learning also is in terms of ability, in terms of language. So what happened since the most of the education happened in WhatsApp, more teachers shared contents, different kinds of resource materials, videos. Many of them are in English, and when the students are later, they're just going through those materials, they find it that they're very difficult to understand the content those are shared in English. So that was the other challenge that we face. So next slide, please.
Diva, we have to sum it up a bit. Time is come to an end.
So,
If you could summarize it a bit, would be very nice. Thank you.
I came to end. Yeah, next slide, please. So we can see, so therefore the impact is multifold. One thing was very clear, that there is the educational inequality widened across all different groups. The second thing is learning deficit. Majority of the children have said that they are not learning anything and they have to change their future plan, because in this way they are not able to pursue what they're dreaming for. There is increase in incidence of dropout. Many of the children are actually started going with their parents and family for supporting their work. Girls are going for domestic work with their mothers. For a larger long time screen time, there is impact on physical health. Otherwise, also when the online classes are happening, no other kind of activities teachers are doing, only just class and content and syllabus. So it has impacted physical health. And last thing is impact on health, mental health, that no one is much eager to listen, even the policy makers. The students are very much depression, frustration, and living in, especially in the poor economic the households, there regular kind of violence is happening. And so many of the respondents and their parents, teachers have said that children started using abusive languages, they started behaving very poorly. So these are the things happen. The last slide, please. Yeah, so what are the way forwards? In our experience, what we have understood is immediately there is a need of reopening of schools, but the process is not obviously very easy, because there are so many COVID concerns, physical distancing, etc. Therefore, that we are not very prepared. So unless the schools for all are reopening, we need to strengthen the digital infrastructure. And digital infrastructure doesn't mean that you give a device to a student, because that actually doesn't help. And there is and when teachers are actually in the forefront of connecting the parents and students and the syllabus, etc., and there is huge shortage of teacher in India. First, you need to have teacher recruitment, then train them, not only about how to go for digital education, they need to training for the menstrual health, they need to play the role of a counselor. So all kinds of training is required. Students need support from government in different forms of monetary and non-monetary incentives, because the root is for many cases the economic condition of households. And finally, government needs to actually allocate higher budget for overall school education. Otherwise, it's difficult to address any of the things. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Diva, for this insight behind the numbers, I would say, with the surveys you conducted, because the numbers one is aware of. We will come up to a couple of aspects a bit later, but I think you had an interesting point on the slide where you said learning future plans for higher education has been altered and plans has to be changed, which leads us a bit into higher education. And to see what's ongoing in Germany on the level of higher teaching in higher education. So Malte, maybe you could give us a short insight into your research.
Yes, thanks a lot, Katja. Sorry, I'd be totally okay if Ramnet also shared the PowerPoint presentation from his side or from your side, and I found the arrow with which I can advance the slides. So
Yeah, doing that.
That's perfect. Thanks a lot, Ramnet. So I will just start. I am Malte Persicke, as Katja already said. I'm scientific director at the Center for Teaching and Learning Services, the CLS, here at RWTH Aachen. Thanks a lot, Ramnet. That's great. We are a center with about 70 regular staff members and about the same number of student assistants. And with these numbers, more than 100 people, I think in Germany we may be considered one of the larger institutions of our type, but this is at least partly due to the fact that the CLS integrates quite a number of services that other universities, of course, also offer, but by separate departments. So the specialty of the CLS is more being integrated as opposed to having that much staff, that many staff members. So out of the services that I've just listed for you here, let's take a brief look at the 4 ones highlighted. Now, I hope this works, the highlighting thing. No, it does not. So yeah, it works. We will have a look at electronic exams, serious games, video production, and learning analytics. All of those are highly digital things. And let me preface my little talk with saying that we do not see the digital divide that Protiva just talked about in Germany. There is a digital divide, but it's by far not that large. We can assume that all of our students have access to broadband internet throughout the whole day and night, that they pay very little for it, that they have unlimited data access, and that they also have the mobile devices to be able to connect. And if they have not, the RWTH had set up a rental program where they could free of charge rent out some notebooks and tablets and stuff. So let's talk about those 4 areas: video production, electronic exams, serious games, and learning analytics. All of those belong to the realm of digital learning and assessment. And I'll just take you through some of the core projects that the CLS supports and develops at RWTH. The first is Moodle, our university-wide learning management system, which we support. This is nothing special. You all know Moodle, of course. Most universities have that. The reason that I show you this slide is because it brings something to the forefront of our attention that has, at least for the longest time, not received that much attention in Germany. And this is partly for reasons of data privacy and data security. Students and lecturers produce massive amounts of data during the time they spend with RWTH Moodle. We have 30,000 active Moodle users per day. They produce millions of data events, and they are responsible for also millions of video-related activity. And it's not too far-fetched to believe that there may be the potential for insights about how learning proceeds in all these data points. So maybe we can utilize all those data points to make learning better. We then have also the serious games, which is our second key area of work here at CLS. We develop and code them ourselves in-house, and we are currently offering more than 10 serious games, which we have in active use. There are about 12,000 students who play those serious games every semester as part of their regular courses. And while playing, of course, they also produce millions and millions of data points within those games. I'm going to show you 2 brief examples of such serious games and illustrate how they are integrated with the classes that students attend. So the first one is transaction. The players inherit a quite rundown auto part maker, and they are tasked with nurturing it back to its former, at least economic glory. And the game is tightly integrated with a lecture, which means that at the precise point at which the game poses challenges, the students will have heard about those topics in their lecture. So the game is to try out and to train all those things that students have theoretically heard within the same week of the class. So the game allows to practice things, and plus, when students are successful in recovering their company, which all of them are, because if they apply their skills from the lecture to the game, then there's no moment of chance. So making good and correct decisions will inevitably lead to the firm being recovering. They will receive bonus points for the grade for their final exam in the course. So tightly integrated. The second game is Codescape. This is a programming, a coding game, also tightly integrated with the lecture, and students just have to navigate this little dog-like creature through a spaceship, and to do so they have to use their newly learned Java skills, and we have a version for Python also in the works, which is being tested in the next semester. So serious games are quite a success at RWTH. Then Katja already mentioned the virtual and augmented reality. We have more than 10 active teaching projects revolving around virtual and augmented reality. One of those projects is headed by Professor Heribert Nacken, who is also developing, together with his team, an open source a platform for virtual and augmented reality teaching. And again, VR means that we gather tons of data during the use of those VR headsets. We can actually see where people are looking at. So that's highly interesting when it comes to analyzing those data. And this would have been a video now, and it would have been a video of one of the standout projects of Herbert Nacken. I just mentioned the name, and he created these VR edu virtual environment where students and lecturers can embark on many activities, such as video conferencing in virtual reality. We can hold whole lectures in virtual reality. Students can attend from anywhere. They do not need a virtual reality headset, but of course, when they attend from our seminar rooms, then they are given those headsets. And we also have a virtual manufacturing hall where students can rig up some flood protection system, which is really close to the real thing. Our last project, which was very interesting, was a social stress test for students. Students had to manage a town hall meeting where the audience was pretty hostile and pretty agitated, and they had to apply their crisis and conflict management skills to keep the room under control. And those skills, of course, they had previously been taught and then had to apply those skills in the virtual reality scenario. Finally, we of course have the electronic assessments, which is one of the areas where the pandemic has fueled a major shift towards digital. At present, I think about half of all exams within one semester at RWTH are done as electronic exams, and I think in the next semester we will cover much more than that with our in-house developed exam software Dynexite. So when we look at all those developments, the question is, things have gotten digital, but is this really progress? Do students learn more? Are they more motivated? Do they have a better learning experience? And when we look at the literature as a source of information, we see that, for example, with video learning, using learning videos instead of live lectures is reported to improve learning in many studies. Yeah, but for each study that shows benefits of video learning, there is at least another study that shows you, no, videos do not inherently improve the learning experience or the learning effectiveness that students experience. So when we ask the question, does learning with video improve learning? We have to point to the empirical evidence and say, well, maybe under certain circumstances. Next thing is the serious games, where the same holds true. There are many studies showing a highly beneficial use of serious games when it comes to learning and studying, but at the same time, many also do not. The same we see when we look at other formats like a collaborative learning. The same thing. Literature does not provide us with easy answers about what to do and what not to do when it comes to using digital learning scenarios. And the same pertains to many other areas, such as VR and AR, peer grading, student-generated content. The idea that digital learning inevitably leads to better learning and better studying and better teaching is simply not true. One of the very few areas where this does not hold true is electronic exams. There, right out of the gate, assessment works. It improves almost without exception aspects like learning effectivity, knowledge retention, motivation, and the whole learning experience. And this pertains to many forms of of assessments, so like quizzes, exams, homework assignments, audience response systems, serious games, you name it. Assessment works in terms of allowing our students to become better learners. So learning, quizzing, testing is something that should be employed and should be digitized, and one of the few areas where we reliably see positive effects. So to conclude, we have had a massive shift to digital teaching and learning. And this shift has posed some very serious and very hard questions. How do we separate the wheat from the chaff, the good from the bad learning scenarios? How do we create motivating and effective learning environments, both virtual and physical? How do we make use of the potential that lies within assessments? I think we do not yet have realized the whole potential of assessments for learning, not only testing what has been learned, but also for the process of learning. And of course, how do we utilize the massive amounts of learning data that students and teachers generate when they use our digital systems? Here at RWTH, we have instated many programs to answer or at least address those questions. We decided to closely evaluate all digital learning projects so that all the results may be suitable in scientific publications. So not only the standard evaluation of courses, but really a scientific accompanying evaluation. We set up a program to develop a university-wide learning analytics infrastructure. And of course, we extended our national and international partnerships, and particularly those that lay a focus on education. And one of the examples, which is a very, very interesting collaboration with universities from India, is the Global Water and Climate Adaptation Center funded by DAAD, and there the RWTH is working together with the IIT Madras and the AIT Bangkok to further those issues. And that's all for my talk. Thanks a lot.
Yes, thanks for that insight. I think a bit, even if the digital divide is not so large and on the same lines, empirical evidence is also a problem in your field, also in Germany, where we might be a bit better off technically. So thanks for that first insight. We come to that in a minute, but yeah, let us take us from school to higher education to working remotely from home. Hannes, and I may call you Hannes as we are all on our names here. So could you give us an insight what's happening in the field of remote working and on your research? So as I mentioned, there was this quote in the newspaper, "It has made us neurotic." Is everything good? What is doing working from home with us on an individual level, but maybe also on an institutional level?
Yes, thank you very much for the introduction and also for inviting me. I'm a work and organizational psychologist, so I'm not doing therapy. I'm looking into people's experiences and behaviors in the workplace, and obviously it was quite a challenge over the past 1.5 years that a lot of people started working from home, and we've collected data on that, and today I would like to give you some insights of our empirical work on this issue. So working from home, a double-edged sword, is the topic. Yep. So when working from home is portrayed in the media or by politicians, or maybe when you think about working from home, oftentimes these kinds of pictures come to mind. So a quiet place at home, a nice desk, ergonomic desk, peaceful working conditions so you can really concentrate. But in our studies, the reality more often looks like that, at least what our participants tell us. So it really depends how working from home is designed. And we wanted to know in our research what actually needs to be done to make working from home a pleasant and productive experience, and not result in chaos or even mental health issues. So we conducted a longitudinal study on COVID-19 and work. We started this study already in December 2019 with a completely different goal. We wanted to look at the interplay between work and health. And we also asked about working from home, but we didn't know that a pandemic was coming up. But we seized the opportunity to extend this large-scale study to a longitudinal study, which by now has 20 monthly data collections with over 1,000 employees all over Germany and in different occupations. So we conducted the second survey in March 2020, and then followed up with monthly assessments on people's work experiences, on their appraisals and coping behaviors in the context of the pandemic and so forth. And fortunately, also the Volkswagen Foundation gave us some money to carry out this empirical work. And one important component of this study is working from home. There are many other topics, but working from home, how satisfied employees feel, how productive they feel, is a core feature of this study. And we're currently analyzing the data, publishing from it, and I can give you some first insights. So our research clearly shows that remote work has to be actively managed, not only by employees themselves, but also by organizations. It doesn't just happen by itself, or it doesn't just make you satisfied at work and productive at work. You have to do something for it because it's a double-edged sword, which means that it can have both positive and negative consequences depending on the boundary conditions. Among the positive consequences that we find is that people report higher job satisfaction, well-being, motivation, and performance when they work from home. And that mostly has to do with reduced stressors in the home office, such as lack of commuting to work, being able to concentrate more on your tasks, maybe not meeting colleagues who are difficult or customers in person. So we find that there's reduced stressors, can be reduced stressors in the home office. And at the same time, it's also linked to higher job-related resources. So a lot of people want to work more autonomously. And they want to make decisions when and how they carry out their work. And the home office enables them to do so. On the other hand, the negative consequences that are reported include lower job identification, poorer health, social isolation, and also lower productivity amongst some. I have to say that when we started the survey, about 10% of our participants, of our representative participants, were working from home sometimes, not every day. During the pandemic, this number increased to between 1/3 to almost half of the participants at the peak. And this was mostly during the lockdown. And it has declined then again last summer and over the last months because organizations also want people to come back to the office. But at the moment, it's still the case that many office workers are still working from home because organizations don't know how to organize a truly hybrid workplace. Now, the negative consequences have to do with the increase of other stressors, such as increased work-family conflict, poor working conditions at home, and also reduced resources, such as lack of social support or the informal aspects of the workplace that people cannot access from their home. So the big question is, what can individuals and organizations do to maximize the positive aspects and to minimize the negative consequences here? And our research and research done by colleagues provides some important insights into this question. So first of all, the physical work environment matters a lot. So the home office should offer the same healthy working conditions as the office. And when I talk to policymakers and politicians, I think that's an aspect that's often neglected. People say they can just work from home, but they forget that all working from home is very much related to socioeconomic status. So the home environment is not the same for everyone. We've had participants reporting that they work in the bathroom, in their cars, in their garage, just to have a quiet place. And this is even more so true in the United States, that socioeconomic differences matter more when working from home, but also in Germany. People, when they work from home, they need a quiet space. One of the best predictors of satisfaction with working from home is having a door that you can shut. Many employees don't have these conditions. So when I talk to next week, I will talk to the Minister of Labor in Germany, and politics sometimes forget that the office is also a great equalizer because employees find the same conditions there. Whereas when you delegate employees to work from home, a lot of noise and distracting factors can come into play. So it's important that if you work from home, you have a separate, quiet, and also well-lit workspace. So don't work in your car or bathtub. You also need to have office equipment and functioning IT equipment. And I know that many companies in Germany, they provide a desktop computer and also help pay with internet access, but it's not mandatory. So a lot of companies don't call it home office, they call it mobile work. To get out of the obligation to pay for the home equipment as well. And that's not okay because then employees don't have the same conditions to work. The second aspect is a more psychological one, which concerns self-management. So the ability to motivate oneself and to ignore distractions. Because there are more distractions in the home office, people with high levels of conscientiousness, they're less satisfied with working from home because they have to deal with more distractions, whereas they want to work in the office where they have less distractions. It's really important that employees set specific, challenging, and realistic goals for the day. Even more so in the remote work environment, because there they don't have these natural signals like a supervisor who comes around and gives you a task. And it's also important not to forget to take breaks and watch out for healthy working hours. Our participants report that they work later in the day to finish their tasks at home because they feel guilty. And then they extend their working hours into their leisure time, which is not good. So we recommend specific boundary management tactics, such as walking around the block before and after work to have a clear separation between these two life spheres. Or you can also communicate with your family members to leave you at home, leave you alone at certain times. So these behavioral, temporal, physical, and communicative boundary management tactics can help you to better manage this, the boundary between work and private life or non-work. And that's a psychological boundary for people working from home that has to be carefully managed. And that turns out to be a very good predictor of productive and satisfying remote work. Then what also matters a lot is social connection, or at least the feeling that you're socially connected to your coworkers and other people at work. Research shows that employees who work from home, they tend to be out of sight and also out of mind. So for example, they get promoted less often, and they themselves suffer from feelings of more likely to suffer from feelings of professional isolation. One of our studies shows that extroverted employees suffer more than introverted employees due to the pandemic because they extroverted people seek more connections with other people. They like to meet people in person, talk a lot, whereas introverted employees they also suffer from the pandemic, but not to the same extent. Now, maybe at this point I can say something about whether the home office has made us more neurotic. It's a bit misquoted. As a psychologist, I'm also interested what the pandemic has done to our personality. And generally, we find that between before the pandemic and right now, people have become less emotionally stable or a bit more neurotic in their general lives. So it doesn't only have to do with the home office, but we see that there have been, on average, personality changes that make people a bit more anxious, careful, stressed, which is maybe not too surprising. So the journalists put a little bit different spin on that, but I let it go. So we have studies forthcoming on personality change, which is a different topic. Then for supervisors, it's really important to let go, to empower employees to work from home and don't control them, at least not more than people who work in the office. So really important aspect here is equity or fairness. So treat remote workers the same way as those in the office. So don't neglect them, but also don't control them more. A lot of supervisors tell us that they're worried that their employees are just mowing the lawns at home or not working. Which is not true at all. So supervisors also have to learn to deal with this and to normalize remote work. And I think experiencing remote work themselves was a good experience for many supervisors because they saw that it is actually possible to let go a bit. What our research shows is that self-efficacy, so the feeling that you are able to work well from home can be built by success experiences or mastery experiences, by role models or vicarious experiences, by verbal persuasion, so telling employees that they can do it, and also by reducing their stress. So for example, two specific implications of research are that employees don't always have to turn on the camera in video meetings. It reduces their stress. So tell employees that it's okay if they don't want to share their show their face or their home into the camera. That another concrete implication is to not write emails after office hours, or at least tell people that it's okay if they respond the next day, and that also reduces stress. Final thing is that we need a broader cultural change. In Germany, we're in the lucky position that most employees do have internet access at home, and many also have their own office at home, but it's more psychological problems that has to do with norms and expectations regarding presence and absence from the office. A lot of supervisors think if someone is not in the office or early in the office, they're not good employees. Another thing is that we need fair treatment of remote workers and also fair evaluations, so that they actually have a chance to make a career out of the home office. It is also clear that this is a highly gendered debate. So during the pandemic, more women worked from home, whereas more men went to the office. And women are already in a position that they are less likely to get promoted. So it's a bit of a double jeopardy for many women, the remote work. What the research evidence generally suggests is that it's good to have flexibility. So people who want to work from home, who can work from home, should do that. Whereas those who can better work in the office, they shouldn't be prevented from doing that. Organizations have to also take care that there's enough space, that there's single offices. The work and organization psychology research has shown for a long time that open space offices are not good. And the pandemic has shown that again. So it's better to have a private place at work where you can work in peace. It's generally recommended to work only 1 to 2 days per week from home. That's when satisfaction and productivity are highest. And on the other days, go into the office, even if it means a commute. And a clear recommendation is also remote work should never be combined with childcare. Now, that wasn't possible during the pandemic, but it's two different roles that demand people's resources, attention, and they simply cannot be combined. So there needs to be, as was done in Germany, provisions for parents to take paid leave when they have small children. It's not possible to do both. So overall, the ABC model can be recommended: provide employees with autonomy, encourage boundary management, so also enable detachment from work when you're home, so separate private sphere and work sphere, provide connection and communication, social support, and also design a comfortable and ergonomically sound work-home setup. So that's it from me. short cartoon if you want to read it. We will continue our work on remote working and different psychological factors, so you can watch this space. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that insight and for that perspective on remote working. That leaves us with, and we've learned we have to take breaks with 20 minutes of discussion, as we afterwards would then like to take a break of 10 minutes before we head into a different topic in the other session. So before I open the floor of questions, but I would request the audience to type already the questions if are there, or comments. I mean, I think that's a field where also one maybe would have a comment in the chat. Pratima, let me ask you, and maybe we connect this our first session, misinformation. So your picture you're drawing on India is quite negative and black, I would say. No, if you look in India media, you would say, oh, we went digital and every school was digital and digital learning. Are we having a lost generation? What is the way out? Should we repeat the school year?
Yeah, I mean, that is certain that whatever progress we have made till date, we have just, I mean, started unwinding these things. As if the problem is whenever any policy makers are making any policy, they don't take into consideration all the stakeholders, their views. So that is always missing. We are again, whenever we just shifted, okay, there was no such much options, but whenever we move to this online online mode, we are taking the schools as our platform, just as a platform for delivering lessons. But schools is more than that to a children or a student, especially girls. I mean, it's a critical social space. They get their mobility, the independence, everything here. So whenever they just shifted to this online mode, are given so many barriers, they're just not learning anything. And initially there was some interest, but over time they're just even losing that much motivation. And when it comes to, see, if you ask, I mean, in our survey we have asked, if you have been given choice that if you go for online or hybrid or face-to-face, 80% says we want to go face-to-face. And the very select children who said online is their preference, they're from a very good economical background, because a very select number of children actually are opting for that. So children basically, they are demotivated, they are not learning anything. Now they are losing their confidence, because sometimes teachers are not supportive, because even that kind of support has not been given to teachers, that you are no more, you can't behave like a teacher, you have to behave like a mentor, a friend, a counselor. Those parts are missing, because that kind of teaching, that kind of training hasn't happened. For giving them online education, for example, Delhi, only 2 hours, Google has been taken a 2 hours online courses, that how to operate Google platforms and different things. So that's why there is a huge gap between teacher and student in terms of communication. And as I said, that parents, even they are struggling given the economic condition. So even if they are well off also, the kind of work stress that they are going through, that support is also missing somewhere. And that's why children not learning anything. They just don't want any more online. So we have asked the question, what you missed most about schools? They said human element. I miss my friend, I miss my teacher, I miss every wall of my school. So they just lost all interest. That's the whole scenario.
Yeah, I think that's a scenario which we can see in all levels, the social aspects, and then what we've learned from the 3 presentations in a way is that the surrounding also plays an important role. Where is it to learn, to work, to study? Malte, let me ask a question. So it's really high performance what you're doing, augmented, and then this e-gaming and so on. Is this really perceived at the end of the students? That would be one question. So what do you know? Is that really advancing students, or would they have also learning difficulties? And what do you do with your teachers or professors in the universities to train them? Because we learned just from Pratima, it's not just about the students, one has to look at the teachers. You can't have every facility every game in the world you have if people don't know to handle it. So maybe you could give us an insight, and do you really know if everything which you produce is so great and very receptive by the students?
Yeah. That's a great question. First, the range of, say, pervasiveness between the different things I showed you is very, very different between those scenarios. So like the VR, AR things, they are done by very specific lecturers, by very specific teams, and right at this moment, not many students here get in contact with VR or AR scenarios. Something completely different has happened with video and with digital exams. I think there is no student here that hasn't watched a video provided by his or her lecturer and who has not taken part in an electronic exam. So, sorry, there are highly different levels of pervasiveness between these learning scenarios. What we know from our own evaluations and also from the literature, and we must say that this quite unclear picture that the scientific literature paints is the same thing that we observe in our own evaluations. There are things that work, and when other lecturers try the same things, they do not work. And it is in certain instances completely unclear why the same idea, the same teaching concept succeeds in one class and it does not in other classes. So we cannot hand out the be-all end-all solution for good digitization in teaching. What we always say is power up on the assessment, do audience response systems, let the audience ask questions during lectures by digital means, do formative exams during the semester, try out serious gaming. So the testing alone is highly learning effective. So this is something that I can, without any bad feeling, recommend to all of our teachers. And the students' experiences are quite heterogeneous. There are students who say that things have gotten better in certain areas, say that learning has become more flexible. They do not have to attend lectures, but have the lecture experience or the lecture content by means of video. But there are always students who just as we talked about and Protiva talked about, who hate being just taught online, who want to come back to the university. And I think that the dividing line is between all those course formats that do not lend themselves to virtualization, like say when practice work has to be done, when students have to work in workshops, when students have to work with their physical hands on something, then it does not make sense to do that virtually. What can be made virtually very, very easily are the large lectures. And I think there we have seen benefits, because when you think of the classical lecture in Germany, there is 500 or 1,000 people in a large lecture hall. They are not talking to one another. They are being talked to. And mostly questions are either not allowed or asked by the same number of 5 people who dare to ask a question. And that has considerably changed by using the chat, forums, anonymous means of asking a question during a lecture. And this has made the lectures more flexible and actually increased student participation. So we have a dividing line. Lectures, I think, have benefited from the push that the pandemic gave us, while all the course formats who have something to do with actual collaboration, interaction, have suffered.
Yeah, thanks for that. Maybe we could You could take that up, Hannes, the question you're talking about the introversion and the extroversion employee and how that's altered and that the introversion might not be seen. How would you say for remote working, isn't it also an opportunity for those who would not step up in a meeting and say, here I am, let's discuss? So aren't there also opportunities for these people who normally are a bit shy or maybe not the most, have not the strongest presence? So can we see this also in companies, what just Malte said for universities?
So I think there's certain benefits of remote working or at least the digital devices, and a lot of companies have benefited from chat programs, from video meetings, so it increased flexibility. And indeed, there's evidence that for some employees it's easier to communicate. For shy employees, it's easier to speak up over a video conference. At the same time, generally, my perception is that workers, students want to return to in-person teaching, in-person working, because from an evolutionary psychology perspective, we're social animals, and our evolutionary makeup is not geared towards remote work or video screens in interactions. So we need personal interactions to be happy and healthy. But I think we can supplement it, and I think many workplaces will say that the pandemic has brought certain advantages, or at least new opportunities to them. In my work group, for example, we now use a chat program that we've established to be more connected with each other. But in general, I think it needs to be a better mix. And politics rightly says in Germany, and I'm very happy about that, say that the schools have to be in person and they won't be closed again. So basically we have a guarantee now that there won't be another lockdown. We'll see, but they've realized that remote learning doesn't work, especially not for the youngest students. But even the university students that I teach, they've basically forced my university to guarantee in-person teaching this fall. With masks but no distance, because after 1.5 years, people don't want another online semester. And it's the case, so for remote work, it's really split in half. We see people who say, I don't want to return to the office. I like working from home. It's less stressful for me. And there are others who can't wait to go back, who need the office, who need the social connection more than others. And I think the remote workplace is a very good instrument. It just, we have to make sure that the costs are not too high in the long run.
And let me add, yeah. I think this is a very, very important thought, that we learn something about what works digitally or virtually and what doesn't. We learned specifically in higher education that the classical lecture may very well be transferred into the digital realm. And maybe even the classical lecture is not that important when it comes to a modern university. What we need is having people work together, communicate, collaborate, and this is very much an in-person thing. Some aspects of it can be done virtually by video conferencing and by chat, but students see the value, and I think also universities and schools see the value in having people be together in the same physical place and work together on something, so that this passive learning process may be transferred into the digital realm, but the training, the trying out stuff, the building stuff, this is highly an analog presence thing. And I think that the pandemic made this very, very clear to us what works and what does not when we try to do it virtually.
I think kind of a huge test lab, one could say, the pandemic. An acceleration I mean, I look also at my institution. An acceleration working from home, not possible, going from not possible at all to go work from home in 5 days. So a huge transformation and a huge test lab. So a huge opportunity which we see like in kind of like in under a class, huge test lab we see at the moment. But I also learned in this session one cannot work on it, discuss on a general level, because if I look into India and we discuss about white workspaces, nice corner, not working in the bathtub, there are much different challenges than we have in Germany. I think we should not forget in this whole discussion that remote working from home, remote teaching, remote learning in India does not mean the same thing as in Germany. Even it's not just about the technical aspects, also the environment which one has to take in consideration. I would come slowly to an end as there are no questions from the audience, but I would have a last question to each of you. So, what would you say in 2025? We are seeing in digital education and remote working. Point. How would you continue that sentence? And maybe Malte, you go first.
I think that we will see that at least part of our lecturers will have completely returned back to the old habits of teaching, but there will be a significant number who have dipped their feet or noses into the digital realm and saw that it has benefits. I think the shift to digital exams is unstoppable. The shift to asynchronous learning and providing students with the ability to work from home, to learn from home, and to only attend university for specific types of courses will be much more prevailing than before. And I think that we will, at least in Germany, see a much more pronounced adaptation of this learning analytics idea, that we try to integrate the massive amounts of data that we gather from our learning and teaching and assessment systems and try to learn something from those data points about how students behave and how maybe learning can be made better. I think these are developments that will prevail, but I would not be surprised if during the next months we first see an overshoot in the opposite direction, like everybody being so happy that we can return to the presence that is like this dip that always comes after a boom, and then we will return to the new normal, which means very much more digitized lectures, classes, and exams.
Thank you, Malte. So, Pratibha, what we will see in 2025 in digital education in India?
So, yeah, so if it continues, I mean, already we have 37 million out of school children. The number will multiple, we can see. And actually, see, the whole thing is education is so much related to many other sectors like the economic condition. So if you just take measures for only one sector, it won't help. So I mean, if there is no job, there is no employment creation, I mean, it's very difficult that you just giving online education will help, because then larger number of children who are out in marginalized sections, they won't be able to avail this. And if we are thinking just about providing education to a select section of population, then yeah, this can be continued. But other than that, government needs to, because it started already there is a fault line was there, because already the education system was very much weakened, and over that, if you are building these things, then naturally it will collapse. So you have to invest a lot. We have to look for regular classes, in face-to-face mode. Situation has shown us sometimes we need to have a hybrid model, but preferably it should be for school at least, not higher education. You need to have face-to-face classes. So otherwise, 2025 is not a very good thing for us.
Okay, but then let's hope that we continue and schools are slowly reopening at the moment. Hannes, what we will witness in remote working? We will see less skyscrapers in the cities, less office buildings.
So remote work is here to stay, and many companies will still use it as an instrument. I think we will see more hybrid working arrangements that are parallel to what we will see in the education sector. So use the home office for quiet, concentrated work, and go into the office for collaborative, creative work. I think that's the future, and it's good that employers and also employees are more open to these opportunities.
Okay, thank you so much. We got one last question in, and I will take that because it's the only one. Maybe this goes maybe to Protiva and Malte. So will online form of learning education also lead to significant dip in cost of education? This is a major source of concern for students who are currently studying online for a course. They are paid to be studied offline. Maybe this goes to Malte, because we have the discussion in the higher education field. So will we see lower tuition fees? Will we see lower costs? And will we see better access? I mean, we also have certain problems in access to higher education in Germany. Will we see better access to universities due to lower costs?
I think the latter, yes. I think the means of access to higher education have broadened, have opened up. But we don't see, at least with the massive open online course developments, I think there is grave disappointment about how that went. We all hope that socializing education and giving all people the opportunity to receive education, to receive content that was reserved for higher education, would lead to the adoption, to more learning, to lifelong learning across the board. This has not happened. All these very fantastic opportunities are mostly taken up by people who already have an academic background, and this is very disappointing. When it comes to cost, I think not. This has never panned out. The idea that the shift to digital might reduce costs has never ever worked and will not work for universities. I think the opposite is true. When I look at the amount of maintenance, of service, of IT technology, the more frequent updates that we need to do to our learning materials to keep them not only content-wise up to date, but also technologically up to date, will never reduce costs. If any, I think they will increase the cost of offering good or even great education by a bit. You see that with our center. A few years ago, we had, I think, 24 staff members, and now we have over 70. So this points to the fact that the human resource question is one of the most important questions when it comes to how to keep all that up. And this is not cheaper than before, I think.
Okay, thanks so much. Yeah, I think that's one can witness in different levels, so it doesn't come at a lower cost. One may save here and there, but the infrastructure and also the education, and the teaching and all the professional work you have to do in the back end is much more. Thanks so much for this very interesting session. I think we covered a lot of aspects, going from Indian schools in remote areas to remote working, learning that also in Germany people are working in bathtubs and in cars, and what they should not do, reaching out to FETH Aachen and to universities who are doing extremely well in developing technologies, but also struggling in getting students labs in to deliver the real experience. So I think we had a nice picture from school to work, and also bridged a bit India and Germany. So thanks so much for joining. For this very, very insightful session today. We will continue in 5 minutes with the next session, where we're going to talk about a completely different topic, the national response, and we will have a look into public health and into economics and democracy and governance rules. But thanks so much for this approach on this individual level. Have a nice day, and greetings to Leipzig, greetings to Aachen, and greetings to Delhi. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Katja. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.